Stop scrolling. How many classic 80s action movies have you actually seen? And how many did Hollywood quietly bury? You remember the blockbusters? Everyone does. But some of the decade's most explosive car chases, dirtiest shootouts, and boldest endings slipped past audiences and never recovered. Tonight, we're exposing 13 criminally underrated 80s action films you should have discovered years ago. And the one at number one? It makes most mainstream hits look safe. Our Extreme Prejudice, 1987. Before cartel thrillers became prestige television, this film was already staging a border war with military precision. Directed by Walter Hill, Extreme Prejudice doesn't ease you in. It drops you into a Texas standoff between a lawman and his former childhood friend, now a drug lord, and lets loyalty rot in real time. This isn't glossy action. It's dust, sweat, and inevitability. What makes it criminally overlooked is its tone. The violence is abrupt. The friendships feel doomed from the start. And then there's the final act, a warehouse siege so methodical and explosive it feels like a rehearsal for every tactical shootout Hollywood would later imitate. But in 1987, it was swallowed whole by louder franchise releases. Audiences wanted spectacle with heroes they could cheer for. This film offers professionals with grudges and a body count, and that lands without celebration. Even the good guys operate with unsettling detachment. It didn't flop disastrously. It just vanished quietly, overshadowed by bigger marketing machines. Rewatch it now and it feels sharper, meaner, more disciplined. This wasn't just an action film. It was a warning about what happens when friendship meets power. And neither side blinks. The Challenge, 1982. An American drifter, a stolen samurai sword, a rivalry rooted in centuries of honor. That premise alone should have made The Challenge a cult staple. Instead, it became a footnote. Scott Glenn plays a down-on-his-luck outsider pulled into a deadly inheritance dispute in Japan. What begins as fish-out-of-water discomfort slowly transforms into disciplined transformation. This isn't loud action. It's tension through restraint. The training sequences are deliberate. The sword fights are stripped of theatrical flair. There's no triumphant swell, just steel-cutting air and decisions that can't be undone. The early 80s weren't quite ready for this tonal hybrid. It wasn't American enough for domestic audiences, not authentically Japanese enough for art house circles. It existed in a cultural middle ground, and that's exactly why it's fascinating now. Before martial arts cinema fully crossed into Western mainstream, this film attempted the bridge, blending stoic philosophy with gritty physical consequence. Its final confrontation isn't explosive in scale. It's explosive in silence. No endless henchmen, no chaotic editing, just two men, one blade, and a question of worth. It disappeared because it didn't shout, but patience rewards it. Mallory, Best of the Best, 1989. Before mixed martial arts became pay-per-view spectacle, this film treated tournament combat like war. Best of the Best could have been disposable sports melodrama. Instead, it leans into discipline, sacrifice, and bruised pride with surprising sincerity. A team of American fighters trains to face a dominant Korean squad in a world championship bout. What makes it different is restraint. The training hurts. The rival team isn't cartoonish. The emotional stakes don't revolve around revenge. They revolve around respect. When the final matches begin, the choreography is clean and punishing. No superhero physics, no exaggerated sound design, just exhaustion, broken ribs, and the weight of national expectation. Late 80s audiences gravitated toward bigger explosions and larger-than-life personas. Then quietly, emotional competition wasn't the dominant flavor. So this film built its reputation slowly, through cable reruns and word of mouth. Its power lies in something most action films abandon: vulnerability. Fighters doubt themselves. They fear letting teammates down. They hesitate. And that hesitation makes every strike feel earned. It doesn't try to redefine action. It tries to humanize it. And that's why it lasts. Nighthawks, 1981. Before counter-terror thrillers became procedural formula, this film was already stalking city streets with clinical unease. Sylvester Stallone sheds the muscle-bound myth and plays a weary New York cop hunting a European terrorist played with unnerving elegance by Rutger Hauer. The tension isn't explosive, it's patient. Public spaces feel unsafe. Conversations feel watched. Every chase sequence prioritizes geography over spectacle. The film doesn't glamorize pursuit. and it emphasizes exhaustion. Released in the early 80s, it arrived before audiences were conditioned to expect glossy, tech-driven counter-terror narratives. It's analog, human, imperfect. The violence is quick and ugly. The villain isn't a shouting madman. He's composed, deliberate, almost surgical. That composure unsettles more than chaos would. It wasn't ignored because it lacked quality. It was overshadowed by flashier franchises that promised catharsis. This film offers none. Now, when the final confrontation arrives, it feels less like triumph and more like inevitability. Victory here doesn't glow. It survives. And that grounded realism makes it feel more contemporary now than many films that once outperformed it. The Hidden, 1987. It starts like a routine crime thriller. A man robs a bank with manic energy, steals a Ferrari, laughs while bullets tear through him. Then he survives. That's when you realize this isn't routine at all. The Hidden disguises itself as an 80s cop procedural before pulling the rug out from under you. Michael Nouri plays the straight-laced detective. Kyle MacLachlan arrives as a calm, almost emotionless FBI agent with odd questions and sharper instincts. Their partnership feels familiar until the body count starts defying logic. Car chases crash through Los Angeles with raw momentum. Shootouts feel reckless, not choreographed for applause. But the true hook is tone. The film refuses to explain itself quickly. It lets confusion build. It lets you lean forward. In 1987, audiences weren't primed for genre mashups that shifted midstream. It wasn't pure action, not pure sci-fi, not horror. That ambiguity limited its marketing punch. But that hybrid design is exactly why it thrives now. The villain isn't driven by ideology, not revenge, not power, just appetite. And that appetite infects every scene with instability. By the time the final confrontation unfolds, you're no longer watching a cop film. You're watching identity unravel. It didn't fail loudly. It slipped past because it was smarter than its release window. Now it feels prophetic and dangerously fun. Runaway Train, 1985. No guns blazing, no endless henchmen, just steel wheels, frozen air, and inevitability. Runaway Train traps two escaped convicts aboard a locomotive hurtling through the Alaskan wilderness with no engineer and no brakes. The premise is brutally simple, and the execution is relentless. Jon Voight delivers a performance built on fury and fractured pride. Eric Roberts counters with volatility barely contained. The film doesn't frame them as heroes, it frames them as men cornered by consequence. The train itself becomes antagonist and judge. Snow whips past like static. Metal shrieks under stress. There is no safe place to stand, physically or morally. Mid-80s action leaned toward spectacle with clean victories. This film leans toward fatalism. Survival here feels temporary. Escape feels philosophical, not triumphant. There are no flashy one-liners, no slow-motion hero shots, just motion, unstoppable motion. It earned critical respect, but never became mainstream shorthand for 80s action. Perhaps because it denies comfort. It questions whether freedom without direction is freedom at all. When the climax arrives, it doesn't celebrate rebellion, it confronts it. Where that quiet refusal to glamorize chaos is why it still hits harder than louder films that once dominated the box office. Code of Silence, 1985. Before body count excess defined his image, Chuck Norris made something colder. Code of Silence strips away cartoon invincibility and drops its protagonist into a police department rotting from within. The setup isn't flashy, rival drug gangs, urban turf war, internal corruption, but the tone is different, measured, suspicious, unsettled. Then Norris plays Eddie Cusack not as an unstoppable myth, but as a professional navigating a system that doesn't protect its own integrity. The action sequences are grounded, gunfights feel chaotic, not celebratory. Collateral damage matters. And then there's the experimental police robot, an early attempt at blending tactical realism with technological anxiety. It's clunky, imperfect, ahead of its time. In 1985, audiences expected simple moral clarity. This film complicates it. The fellow officers turn hostile, loyalty fractures. The threat isn't just external criminals, it's institutional silence. The marketing leaned into Norris's brand. The film itself leaned into procedural grit. That mismatch muted its cultural impact. But rewatch it now, and it feels almost restrained compared to later bombast. It understands tension doesn't require non-stop explosions. It requires isolation. When the final confrontation unfolds, it isn't about spectacle. It's about standing alone. And that makes it one of the decade's most unexpectedly mature action entries. The Presidio, 1988. On paper, it looks safe. A military base, a murder investigation, a veteran commander forced to work with a civilian cop he doesn't trust. Standard tension, familiar structure. But the Presidio moves differently. Sean Connery plays the commanding officer with quiet authority, not explosive, not theatrical. Mark Harmon counters with restrained frustration. Their conflict simmers under protocol and ego. This isn't a buddy cop comedy. It's controlled friction. The action doesn't dominate the film. It punctuates it. Gunfire erupts suddenly, not rhythmically. The chase sequences feel grounded in real geography. Tight streets, realistic speed, limited room for heroics. When violence hits, it disrupts calm rather than fueling adrenaline fantasy. Late 80s audiences were conditioned for excess. Bigger explosions, faster edits, clear villains. This film opts for measured escalation and institutional tension instead. That restraint may be why it faded, but revisit it now and the maturity stands out. The conflict isn't just about catching a killer. It's about jurisdiction, pride, generational divide, about systems colliding. Even the final showdown avoids cartoonish spectacle. It's sharp, clean, decisive. The Presidio didn't fail loudly. It was simply too controlled for a decade obsessed with volume. And that discipline makes it age far better than louder competitors. Wanted, Dead or Alive, 1987. This one feels like it escaped from another timeline. Rutger Hauer plays a modern bounty hunter, descendant of a legendary lawman, hunting a terrorist whose violence is theatrical and unpredictable. The premise could have turned ridiculous. Instead, it turns volatile. Hauer delivers calm intensity, minimal dialogue, watchful eyes. When he acts, it's precise, no wasted motion. But no extended monologues, just execution. The film carries a streak of nihilism uncommon for mainstream 80s action. The villain doesn't seek money or domination. He seeks spectacle, fear as performance. Shootouts are dirty, quick, brutal. There's a rawness here, especially in its final act, that feels almost confrontational. And then there's the ending. No spoilers, just this. It doesn't fade gently. In 1987, that tonal harshness limited broad appeal. When audiences gravitated toward triumphant catharsis. This film offers something colder, revenge without celebration. It didn't disappear because it lacked energy. It disappeared because it was sharper than the market expected. Now, its stripped-down brutality feels refreshingly honest. It doesn't beg to be loved. It dares you to keep watching. The Delta Force, 1986. Motorcycles launch off aircraft carriers. Commandos storm hijacked planes. Explosions bloom in slow, deliberate fireballs. On the surface, the Delta Force seems anything but underrated. It was loud, patriotic, unapologetically muscular, but history quietly minimized it. Released during a surge of military action films, it became lumped into a wave rather than recognized for its scale. Chuck Norris and Lee Marvin headline a hostage rescue narrative inspired by real-world terror events, and the tension builds with surprising patience before detonation. The first half leans procedural, negotiations, standoffs, and waiting. Then the second half detonates into mission-focused retaliation, not chaotic, strategic. The film doesn't pretend subtlety, it leans into myth-making. Yet beneath the spectacle is something deliberate, a response to geopolitical fear in the mid-80s. Its legacy was flattened into parody over time, remembered for excess rather than structure. But rewatch it closely and the mission staging is meticulous. The final assault sequence unfolds with geographic clarity and escalating stakes. Not random noise, it's operatic. And like many operas, it was overshadowed by louder, more fashionable successors. Underestimated, not forgotten, but simplified, and it deserves more than that. Black Rain, 1989. Neon, steel, rain that never seems to stop falling. Black Rain doesn't feel like a typical 80s action film. It feels imported, even though it isn't. Directed by Ridley Scott, it drops two New York detectives into Osaka after a prisoner exchange goes wrong. However, what follows isn't just a manhunt. It's cultural displacement under fluorescent light. Michael Douglas plays the lead with bruised arrogance. He's not charming, he's abrasive, out of place. The city dwarfs him. Language barriers isolate him. Every street corner feels watched. The action sequences are precise. Motorcycles slice through industrial corridors. Knives flash in tight alleys. Gunfire echoes off concrete and metal. Scott frames violence like architecture. Cold, deliberate, symmetrical. And released at the tail end of the decade, it was overshadowed by bigger domestic hits. It didn't explode at the box office, it simmered. But look at it now. The mood is suffocating, the pacing controlled. The villain isn't theatrical, he's disciplined, corporate in demeanor, terrifyingly patient. There's no easy assimilation arc, no clean cultural victory. The final confrontation is blunt, personal, inevitable. It's not just action, it's territorial tension under constant rainfall. And that atmosphere lingers long after the credits. To Live and Die in L.A., 1985. This film doesn't ask for permission. It opens with arrogance and never softens. Directed by William Friedkin, To Live and Die in L.A. follows a reckless Secret Service agent obsessed with bringing down a counterfeiter. Obsession becomes the real antagonist. The Los Angeles here isn't glamorous, it's bleached, harsh, industrial. Sunlight exposes everything. Corruption, ego, desperation. And then there's the car chase. One of the most disorienting, geography-breaking pursuits ever filmed. Wrong-way freeway driving. Panic without orchestral comfort. It doesn't feel choreographed. It feels accidental, like disaster unfolding in real time. The film refuses moral clarity. The hero manipulates informants, crosses lines, compromises principles. The villain isn't cartoonish. He's creative, charismatic, patient. Mid-80s audiences weren't conditioned for this kind of narrative brutality. No, they expected triumph, closure. This film offers consequences. And then it does something even bolder near the end, something that redefines everything you thought you were watching. No spoilers, just this. It commits. It's confrontational cinema disguised as a crime thriller. And that fearlessness is why it feels more modern now than many films released decades later. Southern Comfort, 1981. No city skyline, no patriotic score, just swamp water, humidity, and a mistake that cannot be undone. Southern Comfort follows a group of National Guardsmen on routine training in Louisiana Bayou Territory. They fire blanks at local Cajun trappers. A joke, they think. It isn't taken as one. What begins as confusion mutates into pursuit. The terrain becomes adversary. Mud slows movement, water hides direction, sound travels unpredictably through trees and fog. The men aren't elite soldiers. They're underprepared, arrogant, fragmented. Leadership fractures almost immediately. There are no heroic speeches, no swelling redemption arc. Paranoia builds in increments. Every gunshot feels earned. Every silence feels dangerous. Released in the shadow of post-Vietnam fatigue, it wasn't marketed as allegory, but audiences felt the weight. This wasn't a clean battlefield narrative. It was about incompetence meeting consequence. The film avoids spectacle. It favors dread. When violence erupts, it's fast and disorienting. But you rarely see the threat clearly. That's the point. This isn't action as fantasy. It's action as erosion. And that quiet, merciless tension makes it one of the most criminally underrated 80s thrillers ever made. Not because it's loud, because it never needs to be. You thought you'd seen the 80s. You've seen the posters, the catchphrases, the blockbusters everyone quotes. But the real decade? It was darker, stranger, riskier. These films didn't disappear because they were weak. They vanished because the spotlight moved on too fast. So here's the question. Which one are you watching first? Because once you start digging into what the 80s almost forgot, you won't look at classic action the same way again.